Hello everyone, welcome to the Lake Rejuvenation and Management course. This is a collaborative initiative by Bangalore University, Friends of Lakes, Biome, and A-Tree. The purpose of this course is to educate citizens on lake rejuvenation, covering both engineering and environmental aspects. Happy learning. So our next presenter will be Dr. R. Ganesan from A-Tree.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity of reaching out a huge number of participants who are really interested in lake restoration, especially urban lakes. I once again I thank the organizer as well as the participants. Uh, it's a nice time to talk about this because summer starts, but most of the lakes in Bangalore are still with a lot of water, which is not supposed to be the natural thing. So we feel that these are all man-made lake and they are part of the human-dominated landscape, especially urbanized landscape. So I will be talking largely about uh, how the urban lakes are and what are the expectations from our human, and what was the expectation in the past for which these lakes have been established, and the kind of land use change now leading to kind of different usage for the lakes. And then ultimately we think that the biodiversity is the one that is going to solve many of the issues which we are facing from the urbanized lakes. And as part of it, I don't have any prescription because I cannot come out with a prescription like the human attitude. As a researcher, I can identify the problem, I can solve the problem, and this is the solution, take it in your hand. So I'm not for that. And I'm trying to lay out what are the issues and how the natural way of remediation of this. And it is not a one remediation, it is a combination of several other things. So how we will be able to identify it? So I will start now. So initially I'll be little bit it will be more like a ecology class, like an ecology teacher, but of course it will be in a simple language for all of us to understand. Unless otherwise we understand, it is a complex issue. So it's simply we think, oh, lake, oh, it's a very small in size compared to rest of the area what we see uh, in our lifetime, and think that, oh no, yeah, it should be get sorted out. These are the issues and these are the solutions. But I would say that we generally see lots of programs in BBC or National Geographic and many other such uh, programs where we get to know that how complex the systems are. Uh, not We cannot have a single prescription to address most of the issues. So similar to that, even the lakes, especially the urban lakes, are much more complex to manage and how to manage it. It is like unpacking the issues that give the designation for these aquifers as lakes. So so I have been asked to talk about ecological aspects of the lakes and designing for biodiversity. So the title itself shows that I'm looking at this lake. It's no more a lake that serve the purpose for the agriculture, that is irrigating the lands. And now I consider these lakes have to serve me as a biodiversity hotspot, or the kind of reservoir for biodiversity, and it should serve me as a human. So this is what we are expecting. It's like a rethinking of the lakes, or bringing in a new filter or new lens under which we are looking at the lakes. So generally lakes means, as I mentioned here, they are species-rich aquatic systems, and above all that, they are they are capable of self-sustaining. That how lakes are having different elements into it, and how they are supporting each other to make it as a live system. So we generally have the perception that yeah, lake should have water. Like we think forest means it should be having trees and wild animals. So similarly, we think lake should have water, and earlier as a farmer, they were largely thinking that yeah, lake should have water for my farmland to irrigate most part of the year. Whereas as an urban society, we live close to the ponds, lakes, and then we are the new stakeholders, and then we also designate ourselves that I am the custodian of this lake. So, as a lake, it has to give me so and so service, and I wanted to have the service provider that is the biodiversity component into it. And second thing is that ecological, we all know that the operational principle behind these lakes brimming with biodiversity are stable. And if we disturb it in the form of pollution or some kind of alteration in the management of land use, the stability of these aquifers will be get affected. Above all that, in the past we had lots of socio-economic goals for the lakes. So they, as an attitude of a human, generally we feel that anything around us has to serve the human expectations. So that way it has lots of social connectivity with the human, because most of the lakes are man-made and fewer lakes might be natural, because due to tectonic movements and past geological events, we have been, we as a human society have been endowed with smaller lakes to larger lakes. So generally we expected the kind of socioeconomic products from it, and now we our expectation is different. Of course, it is also associated with sociological expectation as well as economical expectations. But instead of irrigating the field or collecting a medicinal plant or collecting a food plant, we expect it to provide service largely in the form of oxygen, as well as it should provide various recreational activity, recreational purposes. So this is Dr. Harini Nagendra and her students' work. A few years back, they studied extensively the lakes of Bangalore, and what are the land use changes, and what are the causes, and what are the connectivity with the socio-economic aspects. And of course, in the recent past, Dr. Veena Srinivasan's team also is working right from the headwaters, that is at catchment area, and then seeing how the river system are linked with this natural lakes as well as man-made lakes, and finally how they exit out of the Bangalore region and going spilling over into the adjacent regions. The thing is that their study really give a strong foundation. I mean, Harini Nagendra, Hita Unikishan's work very systematically say that there are private lakes, and then there are commons, and then we can make out that how private lakes are taking care of commercial interests, whereas public lakes are serving the uh, commons, that is providing various social economic services to them. So it's all talks about how stewardship on the local user groups could really influence restoration or conservation or rejuvenation of these lakes. So it's basically gave a good idea about the uh, stakeholdership or the tenuralship on the lakes, and how they could be restored, and what are the reasons for them to going really very bad. So I'm just giving a kind of little bit of introduction and recap how the lakes were and how the lakes are now. See, they had a They gave these lakes. Basically, we all know that most of them are man-made, and we say that 200 to 400 years back, and then some of them are little more back, and then they are more like a industry which we are starting now. So those days the lakes also have got their tax holidays, similar to the way the new industries are getting now tax holidays in the sense, those lakes which are irrigating certain amount of land, and those wetland farmers need not to pay the tax. In turn, the regional administrator, that is that sultan or palekar or whoever leading whoever controlling the lake digging as well as irrigating the adjacent area, takes care of, or they are encouraged to go for tax holiday. So, so in addition to that, there are many from our sense it will be very minor, but they have very important economical issues with the community who are the users of the lake. I will not say stakeholder, but they are largely using it. Of course, later they realized that it is their responsibility to take care of it, and then they get graduated to stakeholders. So medicinal plants, food plants, fishes, and then above all that, the critical thing is that water for the domestic use. And of course, in a village, of course, the Bangalore was coalesced by various number of villages, and then this is how it should have been in the past. So even around 2006 and 7, I have seen this Jakur Lake, where people used to come and wash their vessels and then wash their clothes and have bath. And also I've seen the water overflowing after the heavy rains, especially during summer rains. Water will be overflowing the road, and then lots of children will be swimming on the road. It will be very lively to see them. So uh, the lakes had a diverse function because of the different kind of stakeholders who were in the past managing these lakes. Also, you can see the picture that how the dry lake bed is used by set of village children to play cricket, and then you can see a boy walking with a lotus bud, and then a lady, old lady, she's collecting a lot of leaves to be sold in the market for her income generation for that particular day. So, but lots of changes had happened. Even I said that some 15 years back, how the Jaipur lake was, the lake picture what you are seeing. When I around 2006 and 7, when I saw the lake, these scrappers or these apartments were not part of it, and there were more during the summer. I will not be able to see the birds. Birds in the sense they will be restricted to small ponds, small puddles, small depressions where water is collected. So most part of the lake bed will be dried and empty. And then the Rachnahalli Lake also had the similar situation. So the changes that happened, such changes largely in the form of land use. That is, farmlands have become residential area, and of course farmers were the stakeholders once. Now the house owners and apartment owners are the stakeholders. So expectations, of course, when the land use change, the expectations also change. That is the primary expectation of those stakeholders in the past were to irrigate their field. These ponds should store the water. Of course, there are minor expectations, like as I said earlier, it should provide water for bathing or for taking care of providing water to their cattle, washing their cattle, and so many other things. But now the expectation is that, as we all expect, it should have biodiversity. Of course, those farmers were also dependent on the same kind of biodiversity, but I feel the biodiversity that was uh, expected by the previous stakeholders were largely in the form of fishes and the decomposed litter or the decomposed dry matter that reaches a pond's bed. So that will be scrapped and used by them. So What I'm trying to say is that changes happen in the land use, so that has a cascading impact on the whole system, right from the usufructs that we can get from a system to the users, end users. Of course, the major stakeholder, I would say the stakeholders, non-human stakeholders like birds, fishes, bacteria, and so many other things. So they are the one who also face and they also get changed intentionally or unintentionally. So now because of the land use and the change in stakeholdership, we as we also expect that changes, so we want to change the biodiversity itself. So as I said earlier, the fishes and the water and the muck that was scrapped from the bottom of the field, sorry, bottom of the lakes where the requirements. So for that they manage, the previous stakeholders manage, whereas as a new stakeholder, we want to find a different use for the lakes, that's the landscape, and then we call it as restoring the biodiversity in the lakes. Why do the same biodiversity, the name, but the constituents and the diversity, amount of species, the kind of species are all different, or uh, not very largely different, but to some extent they are different. So we ask, then now we have to ask, what do you mean by aquatic biodiversity, and how they are associated with the aquatics, whether they have to permanently live there or seasonally they can come and go, or they are they're not visible for the human. And also we have to ask, do they have seasonality? They means, I mean to say, biodiversity. But do they have seasonality? Why I am asking is, any forest or any system we take it, there is a rhythm that is very much tied with the nature. So accordingly, the things changes. And of course, last week we might have celebrated the Holi Color Festival, and that shows that we celebrate every year, but that comes in a cycle that shows that changes are happening. So now color is changing, so you can expect next uh, uh, summer and then rains and all the things. It's a kind of reminding us what is going to happen next. But do we see, as a new stakeholder to these aquifers, especially the urban lakes, do we see any such seasonality? And do we expect the subsequent changes in it? So these are all some of the questions we have to ask before we go for answering or finding solutions how to restore this biodiversity in the lakes. So I ask another question: what do you mean by aquatic biodiversity? So generally, biodiversity in the sense any living organism is considered as biodiversity now. So it is the life that is associated with aquatics. Of course, some of the plants and animals, they are not truly associated with the aquatic aquifers, but they use the aquifer either as a food or as a safe nesting site, for various other habitat requirements. So they are not very tightly linked with the aquifers or the lakes or ponds, but their life is associated with it. So we call them as aquatic biodiversity. So, for example, here I mentioned flowering plants. Of course, we all know lots and lots of flowering plants, and of course our lotus and lilies, water lilies, and phytoplanktons, that is lots of algae, and then of course zooplanktons. These zooplanktons are the kind of microscopic animals similar to algae, but they are dependent on this algae for their life. Of course, microbes, they are largely detrivores in the sense that they decompose the dead plants, the dead phytoplanktons and zooplanktons, and they play a very critical role, especially when the previous stakeholder, that is a farmer who was having stake on these lakes, because all the plants, flowering plants, algae have been decomposed and made it as a muck, and they get settled in the bottom of the lake bed, and during the summer that gets scrapped and used to fertilize these farmlands. Of course, larger animals, maybe we'll be wondering what is this larger animal he's talking? Is it elephants or tigers or panthers? What not? But we forget, or we were not able to see, because mostly these are all night nocturnal animals. We can see mongooses and civets along these wetlands or the lakes, and of course our Jaipur Lake also. Because I live close by Jaipur Lake, I'm often referring to Jaipur Lake. But most of the lakes must be still having few of the civets and mongooses hanging around. So generally we talk about wide variety of animals, and then now I said that we want to have a gamut of biodiversity to be in the lakes and ponds of human dominated landscape. So how they are associated with it? Simply we say that, go and take a list, say that these are all the fishes, these are all the birds, these are all the plants, and we do some microscopic study and say that these are all phytoplanktons, these are all zooplanktons, and bacteria, fungi. It is not just list. Then we will not be finding the real meaning of the biodiversity and the association with its lakes. So all the life is possible because the lakes are providing habitat that is very, very critical. And of course, habitats cannot be simply listed out, and they are as diverse as a life form which are found in the lakes or any of the aquifers in the human dominated landscape. So I would say we generally say that a forest is a habitat, or a forest is an ecosystem. So wetland is an ecosystem. So wetland itself is a kind of a habitat that encompasses very many micro level habitats. And and for example, we say generally birds, aquatic birds. But aquatic birds, do they completely or complete their life cycle entirely within the ponds and lakes? I would say no, because they are dependent on these lakes. It could be for just roosting, because rest of the day they go around everywhere. Like I see Jane's here or campus trees, lots and lots of birds. In the evening they get back, and morning they go out. We don't know where they go. Similarly, these lakes, lots of birds, and not all the birds are going to get their food from the lakes. uh, it, it was even this is human made lake. But even otherwise, not all the birds can depend on a lake for their uh, multiple purposes. Either they have to come for roosting or nesting, or sometime for feeding. So the reason I'm deliberating it much more extensively, sometimes it may be boring for the uh, uh, participants, listeners. But the things, my understanding, or my feeling is that we simplify the things and see, oh, a lake is in the middle of my habitat. So I'm going to be the custodian, I'm going to be the stakeholder. So I want it has to do so and so thing. This is like, I'm paying you, you are supposed to do the service for me. But we don't think beyond that. Biodiversity, if we bring in biodiversity, we think, yeah, lake will provide all kinds of services, but it is not so. That is the reason I keep on elaborating on various other things. And then next, we should ask, do they have seasonality? Do our lakes can have seasonality? Like we celebrated Holi, and see that our trees along the roads and avenues are bursting into colors, tabubias and so many other plants. And if we go to the forest, we see flame of the forest, and then coral tree and so many other things. But uh, we should sit back as an urban dweller. We should sit back and think: do we see that kind of seasonality in our lakes? I would say, being a person living next to Jaipur Lake and Rachanali Lake, and I also seen lakes in the not unurbanized or non-urbanized landscapes. Lakes have clear seasonality, not only holding the water, but even they have water. There are clear seasonality. Different plant groups comes into life according to the depth. So we see during the rains, water is overflowing in the lake, and most of us might have seen this is a time uh, fishes go out or fishes get in into the lakes from the neighboring lakes. And then you can also see the dry lake bed. Sometime dry lake bed will be very very and as a urban dweller you'll be thinking, oh, it is foul smelling, because water is concentrating to small small puddles, and then a lot of organic content, and then they are putrefying. So we may feel, we may close our nose, we may shut our nose and say stinking, very foul smell. But the previous stakeholder waits for this kind of opportunity, and because this is a dry season now, and following that uh, uh, thunderstorms will come, and then summer rains will come. So he has to keep preparing his fields by adding this kind of muck rich, that is carbon rich or organic matter rich pond soil to be applied to his field. So he will come with his bullock carts, scrap, all the soft mud, and then go and dump it in his field. But we in most of us may not have thought about it that lakes have to be dried, and lakes also have the seasonality. So I'm trying to say that how it is associated with the biodiversity, because as a new stakeholder we want to bring in more biodiversity into this. That doesn't mean that we have to make the lake all through the year brimming with water. So it cannot support much more biodiversity unless otherwise we respect its expectation to be seasonally dry. So lakes have to be dried up. So, but we may think how it is connected with the biodiversity. Of course, we have to see how the dry beds of lakes are coming in waves and waves of new plant communities, followed by the dependent animal communities. That one has to experience it by seeing the dry lake beds, receding water level, and then the summer showers. So here you are seeing a picture thanks to Mr. Eric Ramanujam from Pichandikulam, Pondicherry. So he spent quite a lot of time in depicting the aquatic life. Some 10 years back, I got this a drawing from him. I got his permission to use it to create awareness among the children about the importance of aquatic diversity. I think that this can depict very well compared. Even if I would have downloaded many pictures from Google site or my own pictures, I would not have been not able to depict within a single frame the complex or the richness of the diversity that includes plants and animals. Of course, you may not be able to see the microbes, that is phytoplanktons, bacteria, and fungi in this picture. So you can see. I will talk about the same picture in the coming slides. So then now we know that there is a seasonality, there is lots of biodiversity, and the importance of habitat. So how it has to be sustained? Uh, sustained in the sense we we cannot completely empty a pond or make a bowl shaped aquifer, fill it with water, and dump whatever the number of biodiversity. So it is not like a Noah's Ark. We can take it to a pond and make it enriched with biodiversity. So it also has to be, it has a very serious steps. Of course, these are all man managed or human, sorry, human managed aquifers. So we have to have a kind of intermediate in regulating this biodiversity in this. So for that, we have to understand the basic ecology of this aquifers. Like understanding how to manage a forest, we have to know how the plants and animals interact together. So similarly, we have to understand how the biodiversity in the pond or the lake is interacting with it. And here, not only they are interacting among themselves, I'm also saying making human as part of the biodiversity. So human also part of it, and then the kind of interaction is what the pond ecology are aquifers ecology. I will not go too much into this because it will be a very drab thing for you to understand, but we have to understand how do we get the kind of center stage that is ecosystem services. That is climate. Climate interacts through various physical factors. So that has front and back interaction through the geochemical cycles, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphates, and various other chemistry based or geochemical based interaction with the water and the climate. And then they also interact with the biological system, that is plants and animals. And these are all made in such a way that their complex interaction provides to the human, that is different kinds of ecosystem services. But the thing is that we will not be able to isolate and see, like because of oxygen reduction in dissolved oxygen, fishes are dying, or algal fouling is happening. But temperature is increasing, that is why these are all happening. Or pollutants are getting into the water, that is why these are all happening. So we cannot pinpoint on single thing, but I would like to bring it to your attention that they are very complex, and understanding this complex issue is what going to make you a better person to manage the lakes that are in the middle of a human dominated landscape. So here I would bring a word very pivotal in understanding in managing the lake, that is succession. That is why I said earlier, we don't realize that lakes also have seasonality like a forest or our farmlands. So lakes also have seasonality that leads to successional processes. So here you can see that when the rain comes, so you can see that how water brings sediments, that is that organic matter. Nowadays, it's all streets and lanes where lots and lots of buildings, and then we have lots of uh, uh, vehicle-based pollutants, tire, plastics, and so many other things. Everything get washed into the lake. Otherwise, in the past, it should have been from the neighboring fields. Of course, when we started using fertilizers and pesticides, those residues start getting into the lakes, and then it started to eutrophication, algal bloom, water fouling, and so many other things. So, as part of the succession, so water brings sediments, and then with the nutrients, and then algae also play a lot of role in nitrogen fixation. So many plants they grow in the water, and then they generate a lot of biomass. Once they die, their biomass also reaches the bottom of the pond. So that is where they are reduced into the organic compound, organic manure, or organic matter, or we call it as muck, that mixed up with the soil and silt. So that makes the floor, you can see on the right side in the picture, downloaded from Google site. So the pond floor keep increasing year by year. It will not happen within 10 years, 15 years. It must be happening hundreds and hundreds of years. So unless otherwise we are not going to interfere with it, finally you'll be seeing as shown in the bottom of the picture that scrublands will come in, plants will colonize. The pond becomes swampy land become a wetland will bring in many more plants, and then once the trees started appearing into this. So you may have a very good question now. What is this? You are saying that all the lakes or whatever the forest we see should have been once a lake. So that is what you are trying to say. What are you saying? Is it true? But we are seeing these lakes for hundreds and hundreds of years like this. How it remained? So that is the question, how the lake remained as we see today. So here again, I am getting back to the same slide. So it's about the habitat diversity. You can see habitat diversity takes care of animals that needs feeding, roosting, nesting, breeding, and that is what the end result lead to species diversity. And once the species diversity increases, we human get a lot of benefits out of it, and then that ultimately determines the human well-being. But in the middle I have connected it with management interventions. That is where as a human we part of this lake ecosystem. At every stage we intervene and make the lake remain as a lake forever. So, for example, the farmers, 200 years, 400 years, we talk about it. The lakes remained as lakes because of their intervention. How they would have intervened? They would have modified the habitat because certain plants, for example, lotus and so many other plants, if they completely occupy the lake, they will be adding more muck, and then lots of muck will be produced, and lot of organic carbon, lot of algal blooming, so many other things will happen. So always they know about it. Their traditional knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, they use to keep under control these macrophytic plants, that is large plants, and then that has an influence on controlling the algae and then other microbes. How we can chemically control this algal blooming? We use lime and copper sulfate and so many other things, but they will have some unintended consequences on the operational issues of the lake water. So we should not, and this is where we have to use our ancestors' traditional knowledge, how they controlled it. So just I said that even 50 years or 100 years, we will lose the lakes and they'll become a scrub land, but they made the lake to remain as hundreds and hundreds of years as lakes. So only some 20, 30 years back, maybe 40 years back, all the lakes getting into problem, and then we see that they are the nuisance, and some of us want to make it as a kind of space to develop infrastructure, but most of us still feel that no, 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 they have to be restored to bring back the biodiversity. So what I'm trying to say is that management interventions. So they managed habitat diversity, and they also had management interventions in feeding, roosting, and nesting or breeding animals' habitat. How they did? They planted bobble trees, and they planted various other tree species that could be in the foreshore of the lakes in such a way that their litter can fall, and then the litter and the birds can come and live there, and the birds can drop. They can defecate. Their droppings can enrich the water, and that water, enriched water or minerally rich water, could be used to irrigate their fields so that they can reduce fertilizer input. These are all have been experimentally verified and proved how the indigenous traditional knowledge are wisely used in the past and how we can learn from them. And also these fishes, uh, during the night time, that is when all the roosting birds come and roost there in addition to nesting birds. So they defecate a lot, and then their droppings falls into the water, and these fishes, they will be in the open water during the night time. They come under the trees, and under the trees in the sense the water that is under the trees, they come into the uh, uh, water region, and then they take the defecated material of the birds, and because they are rich in urea and other various nitrogenous material, the fishes grow faster, and then they build up a lot of biomass, and the leftover thing also get added to the plant material, and it makes the lake bed soil rich in nutrient. So what the farmer do, he harvests the nitrogenous material through the dropping in the form of fish and in the form of muck enriched soil to be given to be added to his field. And then again, by doing all this, he also manages the species diversity. That is, he will not plant, the farmer will not plant trees in the entire lake bed. Some part of the lake bed will be deep, where he can collect the leaf muck, where it will be very shallow, where he will be zoning it for various other purposes like cultivating. During the summer period, they'll be cultivating various gourds like our we see so sautekai and so many other things, pumpkins, watermelons, all the things they cultivated in such a way that that farmer, because he was a stakeholder, he was a custodian of the lake, they were able to manage it by bringing in so many habitat diversity into it. In the process, they were able to exploit. I would say that they exploited the habitat diversity concept to benefit in such a way that the whole human well-being was taken care by managing this uh, habitat diversity synonymous to biodiversity of these lakes. So this is again pictorial thing. Of course, at the bottom you'll be seeing muskrat. So I would request you to replace with civet and mongooses, and of course bandicoots and rats too. So life in the lake. As the organizer who gave me a hint that I have to talk about animal biodiversity, habitat diversity, and how we can restore it. So you could see right from mosquito larvae to small insects, various other kinds of frogs and mollusks, phytoplankton, zooplanktons, birds, and reptiles. So these are all, each one of them play their own role, but we cannot simplify it and see. For example, now I see, especially in the urbanized condition of Bangalore, we are more concerned about shore planting. That is, what are all the many of my friends who are very intensively working for lake rejuvenation, lake restoration. In fact, some 10-15 years back, Lake Development Authority, when it was formed newly, they also asked what kind of trees would you be a botanist recommend to be planted along this. So I prepared a list and gave it, but I still think by doing forestall plantations or along the bunds by planting the trees and various other shrub species, herb species, we are increasing the green cover. But how does it going to help improving the biodiversity situation, and how to improve the quality of the lake, and how to bring back the restored nature of the lake? These are all big questions for the past 10-15 years, keep revolving in my mind, keep thinking about it. But uh, ultimately I feel that we have, including me, we have forgotten how to improve the habitat, how to bring in the habitat heterogeneity in the water holding area of the lakes. That is what very critical, rather than concentrating on the bunds is basically a kind of engineering structure. But as a new custodian or a new stakeholder, I want to use the space as a common space for my jogging, walking, or relaxation, or whatever it is, even for a socialization. But I would today I would like to give importance more for uh, the lake surface where the water is there. That has to be what restored with biodiversity. So, more technical information about littoral, limnatic, and various other aquatic terminologies to talk about or describe about the zones. So here I would take a proudness in talking about plants, because being a botanist, I would consider that, including me, we had a blindness for plants, especially for the aquatic plants. So whatever the list I gave, because well, I gave to Lake Development Authority and some of my friends, they are all in the periphery of the lake, along the how to beautify, how to bring down, how to increase the green cover of the lake space that could be used by the commons. So that selective blindness has to be removed now. So we have to look at the plants that could really live in the water covered area of the lakes. But you can see that there are emergent plants, there are floating leafy plants. But that, even in the floating leafy plants, you could see one is rooted, that is lotus and lilies, and there are some free floating plants. And then submerged plants, submerged also there are floating plants, submerged and floating. Some of them are rooted, and then you can see the phytoplanktons. Of course, phytoplanktons are the microscopic animals. But you all will be asking, okay, you are talking about plant blindness. I see lots of plants, lots of green plants, in addition to water itself is green in color, or bottle blue, or bottle green, or whatever we talk about it. So where is the plant blindness comes? So now we see largely Iconia kind of invasive weeds, and somewhere here and there some small patches of typha, that is a reed plant in some of the emergent places of these ponds. So what happened? Do we see these kind of plants? For example, if you go to Shivanasamudra or somewhere, before you take bifurcation from the main road, to your left, you will be seeing the lots of wetlands and lots of plants. Of course, over the past 5, 6, 7 years, I see that they are all getting burnt annually, and then they are getting they are all reclaimed as a farmlands. So these are the kinds of habitats they have. They provide the habitat diversity. So what does it really mean? As an organism, you are going to clear the plant blindness, but how does it matter for increasing the diversity? Of course, it is like igniting the fire. We can tinker around these lakes. At present, we see which are considered that they are the bowls or basin to hold the water. What kind of water? We human excrete a lot of water. Excrete, I'm using the word excrete because from the bathroom, toilet, and everywhere we flush the water. Of course, we say that no, they are all processed, they are all treated, and then we are leaving only the treated water into the pond. But the rain comes naturally before the human started dominating the landscape. Rainwater come through streams, rivers, and reaches the pond, overflows, and goes out. And then rest of the year, or say 6 to 8 months, no rains, but the water level slowly recedes and dries, and then there was a seasonality. But now, because we get water from Kaveri, even we import water in the form of water bottles, and all the water we dump into the lakes. We consider it as a kind of engineering structure to store our excreted water. As a custodian or a stakeholder of these ponds, this is what we are expecting. This is what is happening. So this is where I'm saying that we have to remove our plant blindness and look for bringing in plants. To bring in plants, just bring habitat. Make the bowl-shaped lakes into a kind of habitat or a kind of bowl that is more a kind of tinkered here and there, so that it has lots of bumps and lots of uh, races in the middle in such a way that it provides lots of habitat. So that will automatically bring in own kinds of plants. Of course, we human also have to help them to bring the plants much earlier. So once plants come, it will like a cascading impact, which is a kind of wave. The diversity of life will be following that. So once a habitat is provided, appropriate plant diversity will be built up. Once a plant diversity built up, you will be seeing that uh, new guests coming and colonizing in the ponds. So this is what I'm saying about zoning of the lake, and not only the lake but also the neighborhood. See, for example, we can make the lake with brimming, or we can make a heterogeneous. We can provide options to bring it into heterogeneous habitat, but the surrounding also has to be changed. It is like a ripple effect. Pond in the middle. So we decided to bring in biodiversity. So our action should not be only restricted to the pond, not only restricted to the bund, but it has to go beyond that. So that is what I'm saying, that zoning the lake and neighborhood. So here you can see that how a lotus plant and various other things bringing in a kind of special kind of bird like jasana. So it actually walks over the leaves and picks the insects, some tubers and leaves, young shoots, and all that. So we can see the receding water, and you can see the birds which are all congregating and then picking the fishes, and then you can see another bird. This will not be in the open water, but it needs reeds and other plants to camouflage, so you can make out. So as a part of the habitat management, we have to do desilting, but in the process of desilting, we should not simply make the pond as a kind of bowl. And we have to identify zones of the ponds as part of the management plan. We should find zones where we can have foreshore plantations with babul or any other tree species that can sustain the prolonged inundation. And then in the foreground, you can see that lots of plants. So these are the plants, they are using the nutrient released by these trees, and then they provide a lot of feeding, breeding grounds for fishes and birds. And of course, as I said earlier, it's not simple a bowl. It has to have some kind of protruding rocks where it could support birds like these deep diving birds. Of course, these birds need, they need to do sunbathing to dry their wings before they go for next dive. Unless otherwise, we are going to provide this kind of structure. we'll be missing these birds. Of course, there will be a lot of fishes in the pond, and the depth of the water also really matters for this kind of birds to be there. And this, not only the water, it also should have plants, so that much more diversity of animals will be there. So here I'm showing a kind of lake. You can see the foreshore with trees, and then on the left side you will be seeing lots of free floating plants and invasive weeds also. On the right side, unfortunately, I'm not able to show where the true aquatic vegetation will be there. And then the rest of the lake, you can see open waters. So they are largely fishing grounds for larger birds like heavily bordered birds. And then as I said earlier, they have to be emptied, the lakes, they have to be dried for considerable time, and they only those puddles or the water logged areas will be good fishing ground for these kind of birds. And definitely you will not get fouling smell because of dying or dead and decomposing fishes. And as I said earlier, the habitats, we should not only restrict ourselves to lakes and lake bunds, and it should extend beyond, then only we'll be able to attract more visitors to our lakes. You can see lots of birds, even the harvesting fields also have lots of birds. And here I'm showing a kind of, this is what Dr. Veena Srinivasan had in her having in her mind for the Bangalore city, Bangalore landscape, starting from the headwaters of this river, and then how they are connected with the ponds, and then how the water has to get out of the ponds or lakes of the Bangalore lake. Here you'll be seeing the Tamirabarni. I had a picture that the map to show you how the lakes are not considered simply as a lake in my backyard. It is part of a larger landscape. It's a forest, it's a protected area. The river descends down from the many hundreds and hundreds of streams. They join together to form a river. But again, and thousands of lakes. I think that there are around 4,000 lakes have been formed over the past 600 years during the Palekas time period, especially of the 1600 year. And the water, otherwise it's a flood waters. The water will directly go into the Bay of Bengal. Of course, enough water has to go into the Bay of Bengal. I don't say that all the water has to be used by the thirsty mouth of human, but they diverted by network of canals into lots of ponds, and then they made the parched landscape into a kind of emerald green paddy fields. And then lots of human welfare things are happening there. In fact, a lot of ecosystem services are reaped by the human who are supporting lots of pond in this landscape. As an urbanized lake, I expect that we human also could support a lot of biodiversity in the lake. And of course our expectations are different, and the services we expect from this biodiversity lake are different, but still we'll be able to do, unless otherwise we are going to support lots of habitat diversity within the lake. So, as I said earlier, we have to learn. We are not going to simply adapt what our elders or what our ancestors did, but from that we have to learn and modify it in such a way that we'll be able to reap more of ecosystem services. So, what kind of support services are required to envisage the biodiversity rich ponds? So, these are all the things that we have to take care of. The destabilizing system, which we are envisaging as a kind of aquatic system, by doing strict monitoring right from human activities, but also the biodiversity, changing biodiversity also has to be monitored. Then we'll be able to make it as a kind of successful human managed ecosystem for the benefit of we urban dwellers. Thank you very much.